On this episode of the Easy Prey podcast, I talk with Jay Massey about short-term rental scams. Jay Massey is the CEO and founder of Cashflow Diary, a training and development brand for building short-term rental entrepreneurs. Jay has a passion for helping other entrepreneurs succeed. Through his courses, he teaches students every step they should take to be able to start and run a profitable short-term rental business. I'm your host, Chris Parker, and this is the Easy Prey podcast. Thank you for coming on. I really appreciate you spending some time with us today. And in talking about short-term rental scams, there was an article on Vice a little bit, it was fall 2019 by Ali Conti, where she details a story about her and her friends going off to Chicago for a concert. And just a couple minutes before checking into her Airbnb, the host calls and says, I'm sorry, the last guest overflowed the toilet. They flooded the unit. So I can't have you stay there until I can get a plumber out to fix it. But coincidentally, I do have another unit that's just right down the street. And I can switch you over to that unit. And she goes, starts, getting a little bit nervous about it. He says, it's a much better unit. It's much bigger. I'll put you up there. And, we should be able to get the plumbing taken care of you and back in the unit the next day. So they get in the Uber and try to find this place and hunt and go back and forth and find it that it's this unit down an alley behind the main street, kind of a shady neighborhood.
Wow. They
get there. The front door's already unlocked. It's just left unlocked. A little bit creepy in and of itself. And they get inside, and it's basically a flop house. There's just, bunk beds and couches with cigarette holes in it, broken furniture. Someone else had punched a hole in the wall, probably because it was such a bad place. Just a horrible, horrible situation.
Got it.
And so they're like, okay, whatever. That's okay. Fine. We're going to get back in the nice place tomorrow. Well, tomorrow comes, and guess what? I can't get the plumbing fixed, and I've got other tenants coming in to that location, so you're out. So, yes, I can see your expression there. It's crazy. And so they ended up, okay, fine, whatever. We'll find a hotel, pay more, and we'll just sort it out after the fact. And they get home, and she tries to deal with Airbnb to get a refund, and it's this long, drawn-out disaster of trying to get a refund through Airbnb because of terms and conditions and how those transactions were, how the listing was canceled and switched over to the other one. And I'll throw a link into the show notes for those of you who want to read Ali's story in whole. But it led into her writing a story about Airbnb scams as she digs into this particular host and their listings. She finds out that this listing is actually, or a unit that has the same photos, same description, is being rented out by multiple people. It's not really a unit. It's this big old, not international scam, but it's a US-wide scam, 80 properties or something like that. And a dozen or so accounts all kind of linked together tangentially, and goes back and forth with Airbnb over it. And finally, ultimately, the good news is Airbnb gets rid of the scammers. But me as a consumer, I'm used to traveling and staying at hotels, and I've thought about staying at Airbnbs. And stories like this just terrify me.
Yeah.
Because having not...
And they should.
Yeah, because what are you going to do? Having not been an avid Airbnb user, I wouldn't even know what to look for.
Right.
In order to try to find out, is this a real unit? And how do I even figure out? So what are some of the common scams that the end user, the renter, would face that they're potentially at risk of?
Well, yeah, this one has a combination of a number of things. And what I would really like to do is that, while you were laying it out, what I was doing is that I was making notes of the actual points at which just the unwary, if you don't know what you don't know, you wouldn't know that you had an opportunity to discover this ahead of time. So that's what was happening as you were talking. I was like, oh, okay, she didn't do this. Oh, that didn't happen. Oh, that didn't happen. I see how this could happen specifically if you've not used the platforms before. In fact, one of the things that I'm often telling individuals, either on stage or what have you, is the fact that the number one concern, the number one concern of people is safety, security. And that's what we as operators have to address. Now, which makes it, it's kind of a double-edged sword, because the sharing economy is kind of, birthed because mom and pop can now do and provide something that typically was provided by a, traditional company in a bigger structure fashion. So how could someone have known is really the question here. And then we'll definitely talk about some others, because I want to break this one down. There's a number of things that I'm like, okay, that's what happened. Now, the challenge, though, is that it's close enough to stuff that actually happens to where you're like, it sounds good enough. And so I get why this happened 100%, because I've had properties flood and this happened, or microwaves or something not go right. Here's the first thing, though. As a consumer, one of the best ways, like, this could have been headed off really fast if, when you make your reservation, one of the things that you've also committed to is your departure time. That departure time is fixed. It's unchangeable, which means if there is someone who is arriving or who's leaving on the day that you arrive, a good, you could say, best practice would be to, like, if you suspect that this is the case, a good best practice would be to message the host that you are going to be staying with right after the checkout time. So if your checkout time is 11 o'clock, but you're not getting there till, say, 6, 7 p.m., message them right after 11 o'clock so that they have a chance to respond to your inquiry, and just simply ask them, hey, we're planning on arriving at 6. Is everything going to be ready for our arrival? Now, typically, if you're working with a professional host, they will be able to respond to that, first of all, and let you know if anything has been discovered in terms of additional maintenance that may require additional time. Mm-hmm. Now, also, just know that sometimes the host needs a little bit more time for their staff to arrive before they can get that report. But ultimately, you should get a response. OK, if you don't get a response, because you haven't arrived yet, this is where you would call and involve Airbnb directly. And what happens is that Airbnb begins to contact the host directly with a special number that we're required to provide them so that they can reach us. And then once they've tried, I think it's twice, and if they don't get a response on the third attempt, they send us a message, something to the effect of, hey, we've tried to contact you 2 times. Your guest is trying to get in contact with you. If we don't hear back from you within the next 30 minutes, we are going to cancel this reservation and rebook the guest somewhere else. And then they charge us all kinds of penalties and extra stuff.
And I assume the guest gets a full refund from the original booking when that happens.
They'll just put them somewhere else. They will take it upon themselves to then get on the phone and start calling other hosts in the area near where you said you wanted to be to find out who has availability. And those, I always like it when we get those calls, because those are the easy ones, because somebody else messed up and then they say, okay, cool, you guys can, so that's a very good place to be. But that's exactly right. So now you've enlisted their help in order to avoid those things. Because see, that's just one, like, if you just do that, the rest of everything here just can't happen. Yeah. Because if someone doesn't have good intent, it'll be discovered.
So going back, what's a reasonable time for the host to be able to get back to someone? So if the previous checkout time was 11 o'clock and you texted 11:05, the host is like, oh gosh, I haven't had my cleaning crew come in. We haven't had a chance to check it out. What's a reasonable amount of time for them to be able to get in there and check it? Because I think that would be, if someone was a good scammer, they're going to say, oh, well, I haven't had my cleaning crew in there yet.
Okay, so the way that we run things, our cleaning crew, depending on the size of the unit, they are tasked with getting 2 cleanings done between 11 and 4, because we run, that's the gap we run. Mm-hmm. So, which means you can't arrive to that first one no later than 11:30, and you must be done by 1 o'clock if you have a shot at your second one and getting it done before the next guest arrives. Mm-hmm. So I know for us, if you contact us at around 12:30, we will know not only if something needed to be replaced, if it was already replaced, or if it's going to take us longer, or if there's a maintenance issue that might still be happening or being resolved as you arrive, because that's enough time for us to know, okay, we have to dispatch, a plumber, or go to somebody's got to run to the supply closet and get, these things and replace it and all that stuff that we have to do. So I would say no more than 90 minutes, especially on the day of arrival, because Airbnb and all of the platforms actually do such a good job of reminding us, hey, Stephanie's coming. Hey, don't forget, they're coming. They're coming today. Make sure you're ready. So they send so many notifications to remind even the hobbyists, even if you're just doing the hosting on a weekend as a weekend gig, you get enough reminders to make sure that you're ready. And one of the things our search placement is judged upon is response time. So those who have a habit of not responding tend to incur a penalty when it comes to search placement inside of their database.
Gotcha. So hosts that are less communicative, less responsive, their listings kind of get pushed down in the search results, and those that are more responsive to their customers are going to be more likely to have their search results near the top.
Exactly.
Gotcha.
Exactly. Because again, that's what Airbnb incentivizes and wants. And so when you do that one thing, you're now in position to have a great defense against something happening. The second thing, and probably the biggest actually, is keep the conversation inside their platform. I know it can feel like it's inconvenient, and sometimes their app doesn't work perfectly and you can't find the message. And as a consumer, you're just thinking, why can't I just call them? It would be easier.
Yeah.
Well, the challenge is that they can't see that conversation. They don't know what was said.
And by they, you mean Airbnb or Vrbo or any of the platforms. Okay.
Once you take the conversation outside of the platform, they have no way to know who said what. And that's part of the challenge. So, but if you keep the conversation inside there, then they'll be able to see the entire thread from the beginning. And then when you contact them, they'll be able to understand exactly what's going on and provide you support as needed. If either one of those two things had been done in this particular case, not only would the refund process have been easier, but it likely wouldn't have happened at all.
So is it normal for, if a host does have a problem, for them to be able to switch over to another location if they happen to have one nearby?
Yeah, that's that. We do that when we've had situations, maybe someone smoked excessively and our remediation team hasn't been able or won't be able to get there in time. Yeah, we'll do that. That happens. That just happens. That's just a fact. So it's not uncommon when you're working with a host who has multiple locations that they have the ability to do that. So that part, that's normal. It's just certain issues, like a plumbing issue, it's usually not just before check-in. You're typically going to find that like almost immediately, because when your cleaning crew arrives, the first thing that they should be doing is doing a complete inspection, finding out what's broken and or missing, so that they can report that back to, we'll call it home office, so that you can decide what needs to happen next. And so leaks are typically discovered fast. And that's one of the reasons we started putting electronic leak detectors inside of all of our units, so that, again, we will know. We'll be the first to know, and it won't be even a burden upon our staff or our guests to make sure that happens.
It's a great way to do that.
Right. That's right. Yeah. All of these Internet of Things, these smart home stuff, we just use them differently so that we can make sure we're providing the clean, safe, affordable home that we've promised.
Gotcha. So was there anything else about that interaction with Allie that, kind of caught your attention of, hey, this is a red flag?
Oh, yeah. There's a number of things, but because, all right, so let's pretend that the host is going to move you. Okay. So let's say that's where you are. First and foremost, just ask for a copy of the listing. Give me a link to the listing. Now, the listing needs to be on the exact same platform that you made your original reservation on. So just get the listing, because one of the things you'll be able to, again, do, because with every listing has a unique identifier. Again, in this particular case, call Airbnb. Hey, this is what's going on. And they're saying I can go to this one. Does this listing have the adequate, because here's where I'm staying. And Airbnb has access to all of the conversations from prior guests. They have access to all of the reviews on both sides. They have access to what are called private comments that go back and forth. They can see everything to help you feel safe and secure. In fact, they have 3 levels of support. The level of support I'm thinking of right now is called trust and safety. Mm-hmm. If that's something you're concerned about, just call on the phone. And when you get the first level person, just say, hey, this is what's going on. And here are the key words. You just say these words and like the gates open. I don't feel comfortable. And then you fill in whatever that was making you feel uncomfortable. And they begin to help on your behalf to make sure, verify, call people, whatever it is that you need. Because just like any legitimate host, they want you to stay. Yeah. And they'll start working on your behalf to help make that happen so that they can verify and get to a point of reasonable surety that, yes, other people have stayed there before, or if it's a new listing, yes, this host has had thousands upon thousands of reservations. There's nothing to suggest that there's anything, while they can't divulge private information, they can give you enough to be reasonably comfortable to find out that, that listing is still legitimate and it should meet your needs, or at least what they're saying, what they're advertising as amenities are comparable to the place that you actually made the reservation at.
Yeah, that's good.
So, I mean, those 3 things right there, any one of those 3 things would have made this you would have either discovered it or the refund process would have been simpler. I mean, just there's so many things. And for those that are listening that have any sort of experience with homes, I don't know any plumbing issue that gets solved, especially if there's water that gets solved in a day.
Yeah.
So that I'm like, that's not good. You're not staying there tomorrow. There's no version of this being a one-day thing. So it's in my head. So let's pretend everything else is legitimate and this is going, and maybe the guy just doesn't know that it can't be resolved that fast. You're going to end up staying somewhere else because, when the bathroom leaks and all this other stuff, it is such a hassle to reaccommodate them. We've done it. I don't like it. And it's expensive, but it's never done in a day.
And again, this is like all scams. There's a pressure point. There's something happened. There's drama. There's emotion. Well, you've got to make a decision in the next 5 minutes or else I can't do this. Mm-hmm. And so kind of all these things put you in a position where you're almost guaranteed to make bad decisions when kind of everything stacks up against you.
Well, and that's where understanding every listing can have a unique cancellation policy. Then that's where understanding what the rights exist in terms of the cancellation policy, because depending on the cancellation policy that's chosen, you have certain rights available to you. For example, there's one called flexible in this particular case, which gives you probably the most rights as a consumer. And it's almost as like up until the time you literally look at the door, you can do whatever you want and you're not under any pressure to make a decision. Now, the challenge is when you're going to a place, typically, if you're going to a place, there are other people who are there. Is there availability somewhere else? Those are all, that's a completely different, question. But the platforms have done a reasonably decent job, in my opinion, of still giving you an option. You just oftentimes are just not aware of them. And what's unfortunate is that, especially in Airbnb's case, there are multiple places during the reservation process, like before you make the reservation, where you are asked to confirm that you understand. And unfortunately, most people choose not to read it.
It's very, I haven't seen their particular thing, but it's probably very typical to most software applications and websites when you go to. It's 45 pages of legalese that even if you did have the 3 hours to read it, you wouldn't know what it means. Are the platforms, in your opinion, working to kind of simplify those options and communicate them more clearly?
Yes, in fact, and again, this is only specific to Airbnb, HomeAway, Booking.com, and many others. They're trying to play catch up here. They have the host create a simplified version for you that is usually bullet pointed, and that you actually have to accept separately. So it's actually not like just one small check mark near the submit button. It's literally a separate section. And now the small check mark is their own terms and conditions. House rules of each individual host are something that you also have to agree to. And that is a very separate, deliberately separate check mark that must get done.
And that would be something like what's happened in California's party houses and things like that. Saying certain activities can't happen on this property.
Oh, absolutely. Right. Yeah. That party house. No, we don't do, no. that you can't. Yeah, no, that's not going to happen because we'll just know. We will know, already if that's your intent. Mm-hmm. And I know it sounds crazy, but on the operator side, there's a pattern. It is predictable to those who have less than, honest intent. And it's really, really clear for us. There are certain things that happen in a certain order or with a certain frequency. And we go, okay, cool, let's watch this one. And we just literally flag it and have our team watch, and we're waiting. Mm-hmm. And then as soon as they go, okay, that's what we thought. Let's get them out next. Because that's just what happens. We know it's coming and we're prepared and we're enabled and empowered to be able to make it, to make corrections when needed.
Gotcha. So what about the situations where the person gets there, they get into the property and it was advertised as a 3-bedroom penthouse suite, and it turns out to be a 2-bedroom condo, the carpet's peeling off the floor and and all that kind of stuff, where it's just substantially different than what the listing indicated.
Yeah. And the key word you said is substantially, or they use the word materially different. What this is depending on your documentation, because this is what it's going to come down to, is your documentation. You have to document that the substantial difference relative to the photos and the description that was given. Okay. That's where that is. In now, because everyone has a cell phone with a camera, I would recommend, though, you still take video, even though you can't send video through their app or directly to them, upload it to a Google Drive and then send the link over to Airbnb. And that will give them the support material, because what's going to happen as soon as you do that, they then contact us and say, hey, this is what they're saying is present, and we don't see any evidence of it in your photos. We don't see any disclosure. You never told them. Is this true or not?
Gotcha.
And we have an opportunity to respond. And then again, most of the times, like I said, if it's materially different and there's nothing that was inside of our control that we could have done to prevent or tell you or warn you, etc., then you end up with 100% of your money back. And if you want, they will assist you with the rebooking situation 100% of the time. If again, the issue is availability. That's usually the biggest challenge. And especially once it depends on what your arrival time is, because after a certain time, depending on time zones and country, they can't contact us, and it has to wait until the morning. And that's when it's really, really tough, is because it's usually late at night or something of that nature. So if you are traveling and your arrival time is late, everything that we've discussed, it's really important that you do before that cutoff time, which is usually around 10 p.m. For that cutoff time, because it's going to be hard for them. Their hands are going to be tied by certain laws that they just can't break until the morning, and they just have to wait unless it's a verified emergency, fire, flood, something like that. But that's not what we would be dealing with at that time.
Gotcha. So are there any, taking it like a step before all this happens,
Sure.
Is there something that people should be looking for in listings that should be red flags or warning signs based off of listings?
Read them. Don't just look at the photos. I know it sounds basic, but that's really what it comes down to. See, one of the things that Airbnb also does is that they'll penalize us for using the same words over and over and over again, like any other search engine. So we can't just copy and paste. Even if you have 10 units at the exact same location, we have to come up with different ways of saying the same thing. Additionally, if you begin to see something where the photos begin to look similar, then ask. There's nothing wrong with, take a screenshot of if you are suspicious of a place, take a screenshot of many or any of the photos, just do a Google image search. It'll tell you really quickly, hey, we found this here. And if you see a stock image, it's going to tell you really fast that, something is up here, and you will be able to take appropriate action at that time.
Gotcha. So I guess the other question is, coming from the opposite side,
Yep.
As a host or someone who owns a property that you're wanting to put out on Airbnb or any of the short-term rental platforms, are there scams that guests try to put on the hosts? And what are those scams?
Absolutely. That's absolutely 100%. And it depends on the season, depends on the country, but because there are certain ones that are popular for certain times of the year. But I will say likely the most common, if I like, top one, it is unfortunately very out of control. And it's hard. Our hands are kind of tied, but there's a lot of abuse of the whole emotional support animals, service animals and whatnot, because there are just certain things we can't say or ask and do. Mm-hmm. And interestingly, most people don't understand it. In a number of states, it's actually a misdemeanor that can, result in fines and some jail time. It's interesting, but that's probably the biggest issue. I know that there's not enough inventory to serve those of you who want to travel with your pet, but just tell us, just please tell us, because sometimes, and this is definitely the case in my case, there are some places where we can have pets, but we say no, mm-hmm. because of the way people tend to abuse that it's pet friendly, so this should be okay type of situation. And so we'll make that person have to ask us. Mm-hmm. And then it gives us the ability to respond and say, okay, tell us we need to know things like height, weight, breed, for all the reasons. Because unfortunately, what some people call a pet today can get a little creative.
An emotional support pony?
I was thinking pig. And okay. I wish I could make this stuff up. But, so it's like, okay, so, and that's probably the biggest abuse by far. And the challenge is that oftentimes we can probably direct you to the correct location. And like in our case, we can say, hey, this location would be better than the one that you've chosen. And here's why, especially with your animal. Because there are some locations because there are on the opposite side, people who are deathly allergic to certain things. And mm-hmm. we have to do our best to keep those locations as free from all the stuff your pet brings. Yeah. So it's just a lot of work in that regard. But that's probably the most common, most abused, right after them telling us that only 2 people are coming or only 1 person's coming. Then why did you rent a 2-bedroom? Because, it's just, honestly, it's one of the questions that my staff is trained to ask and remind you, hey, you rented a 2-bedroom and your reservation says there's only 1. How many people are actually coming? We need to know. And I know that, depending on the quality of host that you've dealt with, maybe they didn't care, you got away with it, what have you. But I promise you, like that's literally why my company exists, is to help those operators learn how to know things like how many people are there, mm-hmm. and in a very compliant, safe fashion, because that's a security risk, not only to yourself, but to everyone else who lives in that neighborhood. And I know you're not thinking about that, but we have to. We're the ones with the long-standing relationship with the community, with the apartment complex, with the neighborhood. And just tell us. We can probably work something out. We just need to know, and once we know, then we can help you have a better experience. Because like if you do that in our location where we are at this moment, we have, if you tell us ahead of time, it's only $20 per night extra. If you don't tell us and we discover it, it becomes $50 per night extra. If we discover it and then you refuse to pay it, we have a written, very followable procedure to have the police literally at your doorstep within 9 minutes or less.
Yikes.
So tell us. That's all I'm saying, because we have to provide a clean, safe, affordable environment. You don't know. The next door to you is likely someone, especially in our case, who's recovering from a possible surgery, mm-hmm. or something of that nature, because we do a lot of work with hospitals. And unfortunately, we also do a lot of work with battered women, people who are escaping unfortunate situations. And I mean, when you do what you do, that affects people to the left, right, above, next door, whatnot. And it could just result in some very bad things. I mean, and to be very transparent and clear, we have had guests arrested, okay, because that's just what it comes down to. So you have to just let us know. We can probably accommodate you, but if we don't know, it trips a whole bunch of security, and then you're stuck. You don't want to be explaining something that was very basic with a flashlight in your face with the police and the blue lights flash. You don't want to be in that situation. So please tell us.
Yeah, particularly at 2 a.m. with all the neighbors sticking their heads out the windows.
You don't want that. And yeah, I mean, so those things are there. And then there's, probably some of the ones that are just obvious. Let's just say if you're dealing with a host, we know what a bed bug looks like. We really do. And we know what a bed bug looks like, and you sending us a blurry photo that's unidentifiable and calling it a bed bug is kind of, I mean, we understand, we got it. But yeah, that's also very common, where they'll try to claim that there was insects or this or that and the other, but you can never tell like legitimately where they are. And some of them are so obvious. It's like, look, I found this on the floor. And I'm like, that's a hardwood floor. We have carpet in that room. What are you talking about? They'll try to submit pictures that are not your location. Also, oh my God, this one is funny. There was a time, one of my students, it was the funniest thing ever, because she was asking for some support on, what do I do? She's like, okay, she's messaging me, telling me that she can't get in. She can't find parking. She doesn't know where the location is. I've sent her the information multiple times, and I'm like, okay, got it. And everybody else has been able to find it. Help me. What do I do? And I was like, okay, cool. Let's check your security procedures, look at everything. And then I wish I was making this up. The guest was not only in the unit, she was waiting for the pizza delivery guy to arrive. And that's what we eventually found out. But mind you, she's messaging, I can't get in. You need to help me or else I want a refund. And that's interesting. It's also in the terms and conditions grounds for what is also considered extortion. So just know that there are things that are there, but what can be very, very common is, hey, I couldn't get in. I never got in. I never stayed there. So it becomes incumbent upon the operator to prove not only did you stay there, this is how many people came with you. This is what time you entered. This is how many times you opened the door. This is, because that's what it becomes down to. And by the way, here's the video. That looks like you to me. Is that not you?
And here we are back to Internet of Things with electronic 100%. Door locks with, I assume, key codes that change for every different rental. And so it's like, well, you were the only person who had the key code and it opened at 10 o'clock. You were obviously there. Correct.
Or you gave it to someone. Yeah. Or you gave it to someone. Either way, you're the responsible party. And that's really what it's like. So, yeah, these are things that you had to learn to defend against in some cases. So, while we have a number of expert tools, one of the things we specialize in is helping people learn how to use them expertly, because that's what matters. Because one of the false positives that's out there right now, for sure, is the amount of noise that comes from a short-term rental. And we spend more time while we have a way to monitor the decibels that come out of one of our short-term rentals. So we know exactly, literally measurement to the minute. We spend more time proving that the party, the noise, the whatever you heard wasn't us, wasn't our guest, because people will often default and try to blame the short-term rental when it usually wasn't. Because if a host knows how to do proper screening and checks on the front end, most everything that you have seen in the news, this is where it gets under my skin. Most everything that you've seen in the news is 100% preventable. Like, we would have screened it out or caught it before it escalated, because they have to trip one of the security procedures. And we've got people literally on staff 24/7. That's their job, is to make sure that as soon as anything gets tripped, to resolve it.
So it sounds like there's a a big difference between like a host who has a vacation home that they're just looking, up in the mountains or something like that, and they're just looking to make a little bit extra money here and there, and people who are actually doing this for a living, that are buying property or renting property and renting it out on the short-term rentals. Because you've talked a lot about processes and procedures. So is that what makes this a viable business model for those that have multiple units that they're renting out?
Yeah. Well, with that and that amongst many other things, because what it comes down to is that the marketplace, the consumer habits, it's the those of you watching, listening to this right now, it's your habits. All of our consumer habits have shifted away from I want to own the thing to I want to only use the thing. Mm-hmm. I only want to pay for it when I need it, not before, not after, and I definitely don't want to pay to store it anymore. So how can I just use it for this little slice of time? Okay, great. This is a response to that. And what it comes down to is it's a very efficient way of providing housing. Mm-hmm. And most importantly, it creates this opportunity where demand is really, really high because it's a completely different experience. It's not like staying at a traditional accommodator like a hotel or what have you is the same as, staying at a short-term rental. And the value is there. It's just not obvious. Meaning, if you ever, here's a fun experiment. Call a hotel, ask them what the daily rate is, and then ask them what the square footage of the room is. Okay. Now, go look up a short-term rental, almost any of them, find out what the rate is. And if you can, ask the operator, what's the square footage of the apartment or a room or a house or whatever it is that you're looking at. When you do the math, because see, we do this at the grocery store. Mm-hmm. You know how many cents per ounce you paid for your green beans and your cereal, but now do the dollars per night per square foot, right? Do the comparison. You will see how much you're really paying for how little you're actually getting in exchange. Mm-hmm. And if all we were talking about was space, square footage, or cubic feet, what have you, we'd win hands down every time. But many of you, when we travel, there's a hidden cost that no one thinks about.
It's the knock, 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 knock at 2 a.m. at the door next to you.
Well, that's part of it for sure, or something else uncontrollable. But also when you go to a hotel, you've also decided, you've made a second decision. We are eating out, period. You've made it. That's the second decision that you've made. But yet the hotel doesn't, quote unquote, get the blame for that cost. And in some cases, especially when it relates to medical travel, sometimes you have a specialized diet that you're actually trying to follow, or the doctor says you have to follow. And that can be challenging if you have to eat out, whereas in a lot of our cases, for sure, you got a full kitchen or kitchenette or something. You have access or a way to control some of that so that you don't have to, by default, also eat out. And oftentimes people just don't even calculate that expense. And then families who have ever tried to travel with their children, they know the pain of trying to find 2 adjoining rooms and the cost of finding 2 adjoining rooms. And you got to find 2 adjoining rooms for a length of time. And then, do you really want little Johnny in that room with his sister? That sounds scary. I don't know how this is going to work. I mean, so let's all cram into one room and we'll figure it out. And it's a different experience all the way around. And the demand is there. That's really what it is. The demand, when you look at all the numbers, the economics of the situation, right now, you just have to be, you don't even have to be good. You just have to be present. And that's part of the problem. That's why, people are easy prey, mm-hmm. Right? It's simply because the demand is so high. You just have to be present. Because I've seen things like people literally take a photo of a picnic table, put it in a kitchen, and they still have reservations. It's a picnic table.
Oh, my goodness.
It doesn't even look like it was cleaned, but it doesn't matter because the demand for a different experience is so high that people are making reservations. So you can't even judge by the fact that, well, you can't necessarily just go, well, other people have stayed here. Well, you don't know what might have motivated them to choose that location.
Mm-hmm. So if someone wants to figure out, is running short-term rental properties something I want to look at? Is there a tool or something that you offer to help people with that?
Absolutely. That's literally what we do at Cashflow Diary. In fact, so much so that people ask me all the time, okay, Jay, I want to get in real estate and I want to retire. How many units do I need? They ask me so much, I created a calculator so that you can just do it on your own. And you just go to cashflowdiary.com/how many units. It's literally like the beginning of your question. How many units do I need? Cashflowdiary.com/how many units. Put in your information. At the end, it's going to tell you, based upon your age, when you want to retire, and your income, etc., this is the number of units you need if you want to use a 3-bedroom, a 2-bedroom, an apartment building, so that you can now know how many units you need. And what we've learned is that a lot of people are surprised that, wow, that number is a lot less than I thought.
That's cool. If people want to follow you on social media, how do they go ahead and do that?
We have a podcast. It's cashflowdiarypodcast.com. But in essence, if you type Cashflow Diary almost anywhere into Google or any social media platform, we're there. Yeah, even TikTok.
Wow, TikTok. Well, Jay, I want to thank you so much for coming on the show today and helping our listeners be able to keep themselves safer and keep themselves secure when they're traveling and making sure that they're not easy prey for short-term rental scams.
Yes, thank you for having me.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Easy Prey podcast. If you found this episode helpful, share it with someone you know and leave a review on iTunes. Notes and a transcript of this episode with Jay Massey can be found at easyprey.com/5. Have you ever been a victim of a scam, and are you interested in sharing your story with the Easy Prey audience? Head over to easyprey.com/mystory to learn more.